Formula One has been down under, but now it heads to Japan. We have a race weekend at the Japanese GP at Suzuka, and it's going to be a big one. Are Red Bull going to be able to turn around their reliability woes of Max Verstappen's brake issues and Sergio Perez's damage, apparently? Or are Ferrari and Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc going to be able to take the battle to them? Once again, let's take a full look at this Japanese GP. Let's preview this race. Let's talk about the big talking points. And let's take a look at the power rankings from the Australian GP. Now, the majority of you subscribe to this channel are from the UK. So it is going to be another get up, another early one with free practice 1 starting at 3:30 and then free practice 2 from 7 till 8. And then the same the next day with free practice 3 at 3:30 and qualifying at 7 till 8. So it is another early get up for you British supporters, but it is one that is absolutely worth it. This circuit is one of the best circuits on the calendar, in my opinion. I really enjoy the track, and if you go back to the wet race we had in 2022, now obviously it showed the dominance of the Red Bull car, pulling out 28 seconds in something like 26 laps. Absolutely ridiculous performance that day from the Red Bull car. But are we going to be much closer this time around? Let's take a look. So we have 53 laps of the 5.807 kilometer circuit. The first race was in 1987, and the lap record is currently held by Lewis Hamilton with a 1:30.983. Now, it was off the grid for a few years as a result of COVID, but it has been back since 2022, in which Red Bull and Max Verstappen have won both races. Now, hopefully this year we're in for a closer battle. If Max Verstappen wins, but there's a Ferrari or an Aston Martin or a Mercedes within half a second at the end of the race, I will be absolutely delighted. But personally, I cannot see that happening. Now, the big talking point is that Ayumu Iwassa will be driving in FP1, replacing Daniel Ricciardo. He'll be driving alongside fellow Japanese driver Yuki Tsunoda. They'll both take part in FP1 at their home race, and it's going to be very good for both of them to get on track and appreciate the support that they will feel. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below or in this top corner on mobile to subscribe yourself to the channel, to stay tuned for all the latest Formula One content which I'll be posting on this channel. I try to keep all up to date with the latest Formula One news, teams and on-track action. So hit that subscribe button down below, share it with all your Formula One friends. Now, with Daniel Ricciardo stepping out for FP1, there has been a lot of talk about Daniel Ricciardo over the past couple of weeks since the race in Australia. Now, Daniel Ricciardo hasn't necessarily underperformed, but he certainly hasn't done what needs to be done. Now, I did a video yesterday talking about Red Bull's options for 2025, and for me, Daniel Ricciardo is not one of them right now. He is not performing to the standard expected of him. And for me, he's got to start improving, and this weekend will be a perfect opportunity to do that. Now, will Daniel Ricciardo outperform Yuki Tsunoda this weekend? Who knows? I hope he does, because I want to see Daniel Ricciardo back to his best, which I don't think he is. Now, away from the track action still, there's been lots of talk about some of the ongoings at Red Bull. The lead mechanic for Max Verstappen has moved teams. He'll be with a new team this weekend in Japan. But which team is it? There is a lot of belief that it is Sauber as he joins up for when Audi take over. But there has been no official confirmation as I record this video on the 1st of April. And then obviously there's lots of talk about Adrian Newey. There's a lot of interest in Adrian Newey across the Formula One paddock and even into other motorsports. His technical design elements are absolutely brilliant, and obviously he is a GOAT in the game of Formula One. But there's an offer on the table from Aston Martin if the rumours are believed to be true, and there's obviously a lot of interest from Ferrari, who are trying to create a super team mentality heading into 2025 and 2026. Do I think Adrian Newey will go anywhere? I'm not sure. I think Ferrari is probably a better opportunity than Aston Martin, but I think the bank balance will be more benefited by Aston Martin. Now, Daniel Ricciardo isn't safe in that AlphaTauri, Visa Cash App. He is not safe at the moment in that car. There's been a lot of talk over the past few weeks about him potentially being swapped for Liam Lawson. Now, the reports did originally come from a New Zealand source and were apparently shut down. Now, for me, how often is it that they'll turn around and admit that they're looking at sacking a driver? Let's be honest, even with Nick de Vries, they said that it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't an option at the moment and things like that. Then eventually he was given a 2-race ultimatum and then swapped in Hungary. So for me, I don't think Daniel Ricciardo's safe. I think Liam Lawson will be the replacing driver, but obviously there's a lot to talk about with Daniel Ricciardo. I do think he's a bit washed, to put it simply. He's not the driver he used to be. He's not got the machinery he used to have. Do I think he'd be better in the front of the grid with a Red Bull? Probably. But to get the opportunity, you've got to earn it. And right now, that is something which he is not doing. Now, let's take a look at my power rankings from Australia. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about with Australia. It wasn't exactly the greatest race on earth. It wasn't the worst race on earth. There was obviously a lot of entertainment early on with obviously Max Verstappen going out, with Lewis Hamilton's engine failing, and then right at the end with the Fernando Alonso brake test sort of thing. Now, I think it's a very controversial situation that with Fernando Alonso. He did a similar thing last season with Lewis Hamilton in Abu Dhabi, went unpunished. I believe he got punished for the repercussions of his actions rather than his actual actions at Australia. Now, we've always been told by the FIA that you get punished for the act, not the punishment of the act. So if we go back to with Lewis Hamilton, where he brake tested him in Abu Dhabi, he didn't get punished for that because Lewis didn't crash. But for me, he should have been punished because he did try and brake test him. You go to Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton in 2021. Now, I think Max wasn't punished harsh enough for that, especially considering his lack of driving standards that race. I personally think he should have been disqualified. I'm very open and honest about that. Do I think Fernando Alonso deserved a penalty in Australia? Yes. Do I think the penalty was a result of his actions? No, I think it was a result of George crashing. If Lewis had crashed in Abu Dhabi, would he have got a penalty? Now, obviously, they have said this season they're going to be more strict on the penalties. They're going to be a lot more punishment-based, let's say. So, obviously, the penalty he received was obviously massive in comparison to previous penalties. But it's one of those ones which we're going to have to see how they handle the rest of the season. So, shall we now take a look into the Australia Power Rankings? So, here are the power rankings from the Australian GP. And as you can see, for me, Yuki Tsunoda takes the top of the pile. Carlos Sainz is in behind with an 8.5. Now, Carlos Sainz could probably have been higher, but I felt like in qualifying, I do think pole position was on the table. Now, I'm not saying that the Ferrari is quicker than the Red Bull. I do think there was time left on the table for Max Verstappen too. And as you can see, none of the DNF drivers are on that list. So it's sort of a very difficult one for me. Carlos Sainz could probably be equal with Yuki Tsunoda, but obviously I've put him down as an 8.5. Lando Norris, 7.75. Beating his teammate, getting on the podium. I believe it's their first podium of the year. Something which can't be faulted. Now, obviously, Alex Albon, 7.5. Now, these rankings are only based on qualifying and the race, and I do think for the Williams, he had a good race. I think it's one of those where I think Alex could have got points, but it's one of those situations where those teams that he was battling are so evenly matched with each other, like the Visa Cash App, you've got Haas and Williams, are all very evenly matched in my opinion, that he just wasn't quite able to get in there. Oscar Piastri, I think, had a brilliant race, but I think there was probably a bit more on the table for him. I think losing so much time to Lando, don't believe he had any problems, but for me, he's got to start showing that he can beat Lando on pace, tyre management and all. Obviously, Lance Stroll is on this list well ahead of Fernando Alonso. Obviously, after penalties, he outperformed him this weekend, and that's very simple. Fernando Alonso isn't on this list as a result of the brake test. I think once you get yourself a 20-second penalty for endangering another driver, I think it's very difficult to sort of be on a top 10 list, in my opinion. Obviously, Kevin Magnussen finds himself above his teammate as well. I thought Nico Hulkenberg could have done a lot better in qualifying. Charles Leclerc down there with a 6.75. Now, I'm not sure if he had issues in qualifying, but he didn't improve on his final lap. And for me, I think he should have qualified better, because if he'd have been in Carlos Sainz's position, it would have been his win for me. I don't think Sainz would have beat him. Sergio Perez, 6.25. You can probably tell by these rankings that I don't think there was a lot of good performances this weekend. Sergio Perez didn't really do what was necessary. Qualified okay, but didn't race very well. Obviously, there was reports that he had some damage, but that happens quite a lot with Perez when he's not performing. So let's see what he can do in Japan. And obviously then Valtteri Bottas, I think it's Sauber's best finish this season, maybe second best finish, but ultimately not where he wants to be. He could have probably been a bit close to the points, but they just don't seem to have good pit stops down at Sauber. So that is my power rankings for the Australian GP. Now, there is no other Formula Series on track this weekend. There's no Formula 2, Formula 3 or F1 Academy. So that means that it is literally just a half two get up, watch the race, watch the practice, go back to sleep, wake up at 7, watch the next practice session or quali, etc. So for me, it's going to be a bit of an easier weekend. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Do you think Red Bull are going to be back on top, or do you think that Ferrari are going to be able to stop this dominant nature of Red Bull? Obviously, Lewis Hamilton will be watching on from afar in his Mercedes car, because that Ferrari looks very, very impressive this season. Can they carry it on as the season progresses? Can they close that gap to Red Bull? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Hit the subscribe button while you're down there, and I'll catch you in my next video. Make sure to go and find me on TikTok, pictured here, and Twitter, pictured here. These are the places where I'll keep you all up to date with all my upcoming videos and my thoughts and feelings around the Formula 1 and football weekend.